onto the toes of the sorcerer's boots. Dorigere blanched, but did not move. He saw, as everyone did, the Morning Star mace on a cubit-long shaft hanging low at Gar's side. He knew, as everyone did, that the time he needed to cast a spell was incomparably longer than the time Gar needed to smash his head to pieces. "Very well," Boholt said. "And now move nicely out of the way, your lordship, and should the desire to open your gob occur to you, quickly shove a bunch of grass into it, because if I hear you whining again, I'll give you something to remember me by." Boholt turned away and rubbed his hands. "Right, Gar, Beanpole, let's get to work, because that reptile won't hang around forever." "Doesn't seem to be planning on going anywhere," Dandelion said, looking at the foreground. "Look at it." The golden dragon on the hill yawned, lifted its head, waved its wings, and lashed the ground with its tail. "King Naidamir and you knights," it yelled with a roar like a brass trumpet. "I am the dragon Vilentretenmerth. As I see the landslide which I, though I say it as shouldn't, sent down on your heads did not completely stop you. You have come this far. As you know, there are only 3 ways out of this valley: east towards Bearfield and west towards Cairngorm. And you may use those roads. You will not take the northern gorge, gentlemen, because I, Vilentretenmerth, forbid you. However, if anyone does not wish to respect my injunction, I challenge him to fight an honorable, knightly duel, with conventional weapons, without spells, without breathing fire. A fight to the utter capitulation of one of the sides. I await an answer through your herald, as custom dictates." Everyone stood with their mouths open wide. "It can talk," Boholt panted. "Remarkable! Not only that, but very intelligently," Yapin Zegrin said. "Anyone know what a confessional weapon is?" "An ordinary non-magical one," Yennefer said, frowning. "But something else puzzles me. With a forked tongue, it's not capable of articulated speech. The rogue is using telepathy. Be careful. It works in both directions. It can read your thoughts." "Has it gone completely balmy or what?" Kenneth Beanpole said, annoyed. "An honourable duel? With a stupid reptile? Not a chance. We'll attack him together. There's strength in numbers." "No." They looked around. Ike of Denesla, already mounted in full armour, with his lance set by his stirrup, looked much better than he had on foot. His feverish eyes blazed from beneath his raised visor, and his face was pale. "No, Kenneth, sir," the knight repeated, "unless it is over my dead body. I will not permit knightly honour to be insulted in my presence. Whomsoever dares to violate the principles of this honourable duel—" Ike was talking louder and louder. His exalted voice was cracking, and he was trembling with excitement. "Whomsoever affronts honour also affronts me, and his or my blood will be shed on this tired earth. The beast calls for a duel? Very well. Let the herald trumpet my name. May divine judgment decide. On the dragon's side is the power of fang and talon and infernal fury, and on my side—" "What a moron," Yapin Zegrin muttered. "On my side, righteousness, faith, the tears of virgins, whom this reptile—" "That's enough, Ike. You make me want to puke," Boholt yelled. "Go on to the lists. Don't talk. Set about that dragon." "Here, Boholt, wait!" One of the dwarves, tugging on his beard, suddenly said, "Forgotten about the agreement? If Ike lays low the serpent, he'll take half." "Ike won't take anything," Boholt grinned. "I know him. He'll be happy if Dandelion writes a song about him." "Silence," Gillenstein declared. "Let it be. Against the dragon will ride out the virtuous knight-errant Ike of Denesle. fighting in the colours of Cairngorm as the lance and sword of King Nidemere. That is the kingly will." "There you have it." Yapin Zigrin gnashed his teeth. "The lance and sword of Nidemere. The Cairngorm kinglet has fixed us. What now?" "Nothing," Berholt spat. "I reckon you don't want to cross Ike, Yapin. He talks nonsense, but if he's already mounted his horse and roused himself, better get out of his way. Let him go, damn it, and sort the dragon out, and then we'll see." "Who shall be the herald?" Dandelion asked. "The dragon wanted a herald. Maybe me?" "No, we don't need a song, Dandelion." Berholt frowned. "Yapin Zigrin can be the herald. He's got a voice like a bull." "Very well, no bother," Yapin said. "Bring me a flag-bearer with a banner, so that everything is as it should be." "Just talk politely, dwarf, sir, and courteously," Gillenstiern cautioned. "Don't learn me how to talk." The dwarf proudly stuck out his belly. "I was sent on diplomatic missions when you lot were still knee-high to a grasshopper." The dragon continued to sit patiently on the hillock, waving its tail cheerfully. The dwarf clambered up onto the largest boulder, hawked and spat. "Hey, you there!" he yelled, putting his hands on his hips. "You fucking dragon, you! Listen to what the herald has to say. That means me. The first one to take you on honourably will be the meandering knight, Ike of Denesle, and he will stick his lance in your paunch according to the holy custom, to your confusion and to the joy of poor virgins and King Nidemere. It will be a fair fight and honourable. Breathing fire is not allowed, and you may only lambast the other confessionally until the other gives up the ghost or expires, which we sincerely wish on you. Understood, dragon?" The dragon yawned, flapped its wings, and then, flattening itself to the ground, quickly descended from the hillock to level ground. "I have understood, noble herald," it yelled back. "Then may the virtuous Ike of Denesla enter the fray. I am ready." "What a pantomime!" Berholt spat, following Ike with a grim expression as he walked his horse over the barrier of boulders. "A ruddy barrel of laughs." "Shut your yap, Berholt," Dandelion shouted, rubbing his hands. "Look, Ike is preparing to charge. It'll be a bloody beautiful ballad." "Hurrah! Long live Ike!" someone shouted from Nidemere's troop of bowmen. "And I," Sheepbagger said gloomily, "would still have stuffed him full of brimstone just to be certain." Ike, already in the field, saluted the dragon with his upraised lance, slammed down his visor, and struck his horse with his spurs. "Well, well," the dwarf said. "He may be stupid, but he knows how to charge. Look at him go!" Ike leant forward, braced in the saddle, lowered his lance at full gallop. The dragon, contrary to Geralt's expectations, did not leap aside, did not move in a semicircle, but flattened to the ground, rushed straight at the attacking knight. "Hit him! Hit him, Ike!" Yapin yelled. Ike, although in full gallop, did not strike headlong, straight ahead. At the last moment, he nimbly changed direction, shifting the lance over his horse's head. Flashing past the dragon, he thrust with all his might, standing up in the stirrups. Everybody shouted in unison. Geralt did not join in with the choir. The dragon evaded the blow with a delicate, agile, graceful turn and, coiling like a living golden ribbon, as quick as lightning, but softly, cat-like, reached a foot beneath the horse's belly. The horse squealed, jerking its crup high up, and the knight rocked in the saddle, but did not release his lance. Just as the horse was about to hit the ground snout first, the dragon swept Ike from the saddle with a fierce swipe of his clawed foot. Everybody saw his breastplate spinning upwards, and everybody heard the clanking and thudding with which the knight fell onto the ground. The dragon, sitting on its haunches, pinned the horse with a foot and lowered its toothy jaws. The horse squealed shrilly, struggled, and then was quiet. In the silence that fell, everybody heard the deep voice of the dragon, Vielentretenmeth. "The doughty Ike of Denesle may now be taken from the battlefield, for he is incapable of fighting any longer. Next, please." "Oh, fuck," Yapin Zigrin said, in the silence that followed. Chapter 8. "Both legs," Yennefer said, wiping her hands on a linen cloth, "and probably something with his spine. The armor on his back is dented as though he'd been hit by a pile driver. He injured his legs with his own lance. He won't be mounting a horse for some time, if he ever mounts one again." "Professional hazard," Geralt muttered. The sorceress frowned. "Is that all you have to say?" "And what else would you like to hear, Yennefer?" "That dragon is unbelievably fast, Geralt. Too fast for a man to fight it." "I understand. No, Yen, not me." "Principles?" The sorceress smiled spitefully. "Or ordinary commonplace fear? The only human feeling that wasn't eradicated in you."
"One and the other," the Witcher agreed dispassionately. "What difference does it make?"
"Precisely." Yennefer came closer. "None. Principles may be broken. Fear can be overcome. Kill that dragon, Geralt. For me.
For you.
For me. I want that dragon, Geralt. In one piece. I want to have him all for myself."
"So, cast a spell and kill it."
"No. You kill it. And I'll use my spells to hold back the Reavers and the others so they don't interfere."
"You'll kill them, Yennefer."
"Since when has that ever bothered you? You take care of the dragon, I'll deal with the people."
"Yennefer," the Witcher said coldly, "I don't understand. What do you want with that dragon? Does the yellowness of its scales dazzle you to that degree? You don't suffer from poverty, after all. You have numerous sources of income. You're famous. What are you about? Just don't talk about a calling, I beg you."
Yennefer was silent. Then, finally, twisting her lips, aimed a powerful kick at a stone lying in the grass. "There's someone who can help me, Geralt. Apparently it's... You know what I'm talking about. Apparently it isn't irreversible. There's a chance. I could still have... Do you understand?"
"I do."
"It's a complex operation, costly, but in exchange for a golden dragon... Geralt!" The Witcher remained silent. "When we were hanging on the bridge," the sorceress said, "you asked me for something. I'll meet your request, in spite of everything." The Witcher smiled sadly and touched the obsidian star on Yennefer's neck with his index finger.
"It's too late, Yen. We aren't hanging now. It's stopped mattering to me, in spite of everything."
He expected the worst. A cascade of fire, lightning, a smack in the face, abuse, curses. He was surprised just to see the suppressed trembling of her lips. Yennefer slowly turned away. Geralt regretted his words. He regretted the emotion which had engendered them. The limit of possibility overstepped, now snapped like a lute string. He looked at Dandelion and saw the troubadour quickly turn his head away and avoid his gaze.
"Well, we've got the issue of knightly honour out of the way, my lords," Boholt called, now dressed in armour and standing before Nidomir, who was still sitting on a stone with an unvarying expression of boredom on his face. "Knightly honour is lying there groaning softly. It was a lousy idea, Lord Gillenstiern, to send out Ike as your knight and vassal. I wouldn't dream of pointing the finger, but I know whom Ike can thank for his broken pins. Yes, I swear we've killed 2 birds with 1 stone. One was a lunatic, insanely reviving the legends of how a bold knight defeats a dragon in a duel, and the other, a swindler, who wanted to make money from it. Do you know who I'm talking about, Gillenstiern? What? Good. And now our move. Now the dragon is ours. Now we, the Reavers, will sort out that dragon, but by ourselves."
"And the agreement, Boholt?" the Chancellor drawled. "What about the agreement?"
"I don't give a shit about the agreement."
"This is outrageous! This is lèse-majesté!" Gillenstiern stamped his foot. "King Nidomir,
what about the king?"
Boholt yelled, resting on an enormous 2-handed sword.
"Perhaps the king will personally decide to take on the dragon by himself. Or perhaps you, his faithful chancellor, will squeeze your belly into a suit of armour and go into battle. Why not? Please do. We'll wait, my lord. You had your chance, Guildenstern. Had Ike mortally lanced the dragon, you would have taken it in its entirety. Nothing would have been left to us, because we hadn't helped, not one golden scale on its back. But it's too late now. Open your eyes. There's no one to fight under Cairngorm's colours. You won't find another chump like Ike.
That's not true,
the cobbler sheepbagger said, hurrying to the king, who was still busy watching a point on the horizon of interest only to him.
Oh, king, just wait a little, and our men from Bearfield will be arriving. They'll be here any moment. To hell with the cocksure nobility. Chase them away. You'll see who is really brave, who is strong indeed, and not just in word.
Shut your trap, Boholt said calmly, wiping a spot of rust from his breastplate. Shut your trap, peasant, because if you don't, I'll shut it so hard I'll shove your teeth down your throat.
Sheepbagger, seeing Kennet and Gar approaching, quickly backed away and hid among the Bearfield constables.
King, Guildenstern called. Oh, king, what do you command?
The expression of boredom suddenly vanished from Nidemir's face. The underage monarch wrinkled his freckly nose and stood up. What do I command? He said in a shrill voice. You finally asked, Guildenstern, rather than decide for me and speak for me and on my behalf. I'm very pleased, and may it thus remain, Guildenstern. From this moment, you will be silent and listen to my orders. Here is the first of them. Muster the men and order Ike of Denesley to be placed on a waggon. We're going back to Cairngorm.
But, sire, not
a word, Guildenstern. Madam Yennefer, noble lords, I bid you farewell. I've lost some time on this expedition, but have gained much. I have learned a great deal. Thank you for your words, Madam Yennefer, Master Dorigere, Sir Boholt, and thank you for your silence, Sir Geralt.
Oh, king, Guildenstern said. What do you mean? The dragon is in our grasp. It's there for the taking. King, your dream,
my dream, Nidemir repeated pensively. I do not have it yet. And should I stay here, then I might never have it.
But Mariore, and the hand of the princess?
The Chancellor waved his arms, not giving up.
And the throne, king. The people there will acknowledge you as...
I don't give a shit about the people there, as Sir Boholt would say. Nidemir laughed. The throne of Maliore is mine anyway, because in Cairngorm I have 300 armoured troops and 1,500 foot soldiers against their 1,000 crappy spearmen. Do they acknowledge me? They will have to. I'll keep hanging, beheading and dismembering until they do. And their princess is a fat goose, and to hell with her hand. I only need her womb. Let her bear me an heir, and then I'll poison her anyway, using Master Sheepbagger's method. That's enough chatter, Guildenstern. Said about carrying out my orders.
Indeed, Dandelion whispered to Geralt. He has learned a great deal.
A great deal, Geralt confirmed, looking at the hillock, where the golden dragon, with its triangular head lowered, was licking something grey-green, sitting in the grass beside it with its forked scarlet tongue.
But I wouldn't like to be his subject, Dandelion.
And what do you think will happen now? The Witcher looked calmly at the tiny grey-green creature, fluttering its bat-like wings beside the golden talons of the stooping dragon.
And what's your opinion about all this, Dandelion? What do you think?
What does it matter what I think? I'm a poet, Geralt. Does my opinion matter at all?
Yes, it does.
Well, I'll tell you then. When I see a reptile, Geralt, a viper, let's say, or some other serpent, it gives me the creeps. The vileness disgusts and terrifies me. But that dragon...
Yeah?
It's pretty, Geralt.
Thank you, Dandelion.
What for? Geralt turned his head away, and with a slow movement reached for the buckle of his belt, which crossed his chest diagonally and shortened it by 2 holes. He lifted his right hand to check if his sword hilt was positioned correctly. Dandelion looked on with eyes wide open. Geralt? Do you mean to...
Yes, the Witcher said calmly. There is a limit to what I can accept as possible. I've had enough of all this. Are you going with Nidemir or staying, Dandelion?
The troubadour leaned over, placed his lute beneath a stone cautiously and with great care, and then straightened up. I'm staying. What did you say? The limits of possibility? I'm bagging that as the title of a ballad.
It could be your last one, Dandelion.
Geralt?
Hmm?
Don't kill it. Can you not?
A sword is a sword, Dandelion. Once drawn.
Please try.
I will.
Dorigaray chuckled, turned towards Yennefer and the Reavers, and pointed at the receding royal caravan. Over there, he said, King Nidemir is leaving. He no longer gives orders through Gillenstiern's mouth. He is departing, having demonstrated good sense. I'm glad you're here, Dandelion. I suggest you begin composing a ballad. What about? About? The sorcerer drew his wand from his coat. Master Dorigaray, sorcerer, chasing back home the rabble who wanted to use vulgar methods to kill the last golden dragon left in the world. Don't move, Boholt. Yarpen, hands off your battle-axe. Don't move a muscle, Yennefer. Off you go, good-for-nothings. Follow the king like good little boys. Be off. Mount your horses or wagons. I warn you that if anybody makes a false move, all that will remain of him will be a burning smell and a bit of fused sand. I am serious. Dorigaray, Yennefer hissed.
My lord sorcerer,
Boholt said conciliatorily. Is this any way to act? Be quiet, Boholt. I told you not to touch that dragon. Fables are not to be killed. About turn and scram. Yennefer's hand suddenly shot forward, and the ground around Dorigaray exploded in blue flame, seething in a dust cloud of torn turf and grit. The sorcerer staggered, encircled by fire. Gar leapt forward and struck him in the face with the heel of his hand. Dorigaray fell to the ground, a bolt of red lightning shooting from his wand and harmlessly zapping out among the rocks. Beanpole sprang at him from the other side, kicked the sorcerer to the ground, and took a backswing to repeat the blow. Geralt fell among them, pushed Beanpole away, drew his sword and thrust flat, aiming between the breastplate and the spalder. He was thwarted by Boholt, who parried the blow with the broad blade of his two-handed sword. Dandelion tried to trip Gar, but ineffectively. Gar clung to the bard's rainbow-hued jerkin and thumped him between the eyes with his fist. Yarpen Zigrin, leaping from behind, tripped Dandelion, hitting him behind his knees with the haft of a hatchet. Geralt spun into a pirouette, evading Boholt's sword, and jabbed at the onrushing Beanpole, tearing off his iron bracer. Beanpole leapt back, tripped and fell over. Boholt grunted and whirled his sword like a scythe. Geralt jumped over the whistling blade, slammed the hilt of his sword into Boholt's breastplate, fended him off, and thrust, aiming for his cheek. Boholt, realizing he could not parry with his heavy sword, threw himself backwards, falling on his back. The Witcher leapt at him, and at that moment felt the earth fall away from under his rapidly numbing feet. He saw the horizon going from horizontal to vertical. Vainly trying to form a protective sign with his fingers, he fell heavily onto the ground on his side, his sword slipping from his numb hand. There was a pounding and a buzzing in his ears. Tie them up before the spell stops working, Yennefer said, somewhere above but very far away. All three of them. Dorigaray and Geralt, befuddled and paralyzed, allowed themselves to be bound and tethered to a wagon, silently and without resisting. Dandelion fought and cursed, so he received a punch in the face before he was tied to the wagon. Why tie him up, traitors, sons of dogs, Sheepbagger said, walking over. They should be clubbed to death at once and be done with it. You're a son yourself and not a dog's, Yarpen Zigrin said. Don't insult dogs here. Scram, you heel. You're awfully brave, Sheepbagger snapped. We'll see if you're brave enough when my comrades arrive from Bearfield. They'll be here any moment. You... Yarpen, twisting with surprising agility, considering his build, whacked Sheepbagger over the head with his hatchet. Gar, standing alongside, gave him a kick for good measure. Sheepbagger flew a few feet through the air and fell nose first in the grass. You'll be sorry, he yelled, crawling on all fours. I'll fix... Lads, Yarpen Zigrin roared. Kick the cobbler in the cobblers. Grab him, Gar. Sheepbagger did not wait. He sprang up and dashed towards the eastern canyon. The Bearfield trackers followed him, cringing. The dwarves, cackling, sent a hail of stones after them. The air's freshened up already, Yarpen laughed. Right, Boholt, let's get down to the dragon. Hold on. Yennefer raised a hand. The only thing you're getting down to is the bottom of the valley. Begone, all of you. Excuse me? Boholt bent over, his eyes blazing ominously. What did you say, most honourable Madam Witch? Follow that cobbler, Yennefer repeated. All of you. I'll deal with the dragon myself, using unconventional weapons, and you can thank me as you leave. Had it not been for me, you would have tasted the Witcher's sword. Come now, quickly, Boholt, before I lose my temper. I warn you that I know a spell which can make you all geldings. I just have to raise my hand.
Is that so? Boholt drawled. My patience has reached its limits. I won't be made a fool of. Beanpole, unhook the shaft from the cart. I feel I'll also be needing unconventional weapons. Someone is soon going to get a damn good thrashing, my lords. I won't point the finger, but a certain hideous witch is going to get a bloody sound hiding.
Just try, Boholt. You'll brighten up my day.
Why, Yennefer? The dwarf asked reproachfully.
Perhaps I simply don't like sharing, Yarpen.
Well now.
Yarpen Zigrin smiled.
That's profoundly human. So human it's almost dwarven. It's nice to see familiar qualities in a sorceress. But I don't like sharing either, Yennefer.
He hunched into a short, very rapid backswing. A steel ball, appearing out of his pocket as if from nowhere, whirred through the air and smacked Yennefer right in the forehead. Before the sorceress had time to come to her senses, she was suspended in the air, being held up by Beanpole and Gar, and Yarpen was binding her ankles with twine. Yennefer screamed furiously, but one of Yarpen's boys threw the wagon's reins over her head from behind and pulled them tight, the leather strap digging into her open mouth, stifling her cries.
Well, Yennefer, Boholt said as he walked over, how do you plan to turn me into a gelding now, when you can't move a hand?
He tore the collar of her coat, and then ripped and wrenched open her blouse. Yennefer shrieked, choked by the reins.
I don't have the time now,
Boholt said, groping her shamelessly to the cackling of the dwarves.
But wait a little while, witch. Once we've sorted out the dragon, we'll make merry. Tie her firmly to the wheel, boys. Both little hands to the rim, so she won't be able to lift a finger. And no one's to bloody touch her yet, my lords. We'll sort the order out, depending on who does a good job on the dragon.
Beware, Boholt, Geralt, arms tied, said softly, calmly and ominously. I'll follow you to the ends of the world.
You surprise me,
the Reaver replied, just as calmly.
In your place, I'd keep mum.
I know you, and I know I have to take your threat seriously. I won't have a choice. You might not come out of this alive, Witcher.
We'll return to this matter. Gar, Beanpole, to horse.
What bad luck, Dandelion snapped. Why the hell did I get mixed up in this? Dorigere, lowering his head, watched the thick drops of blood slowly dripping from his nose onto his belly. Would you stop staring? The sorceress screamed at Geralt. She was writhing like a snake in her bonds, vainly trying to conceal her exposed charms. The Witcher obediently turned his head away. Dandelion did not. You must have used an entire barrel of mandrake elixir on what I can see, Yennefer, the bard laughed. Your skin's like a 16-year-old's, damn it. Shut your trap, horse son, the sorceress bellowed. How old are you actually, Yennefer? Dandelion asked, not giving up. 200? Well, 150, let's say. And you're behaving like... Yennefer twisted her neck and spat at him, but was wide of the mark. Yen, the Witcher said reproachfully, wiping his spit-covered ear on his shoulder. I wish he would stop staring. Not on your life, Dandelion said, without taking his eyes off the bedraggled sorceress. I'm here because of her. They may slit our throats, but at least I'll die happy. Shut up, Dandelion, the Witcher said. I have no intention of so doing. In fact, I plan to compose the ballad of the two tits. Please don't interfere. Dandelion, Dorigere sniffed through his bloody nose. Be serious. I am being bloody serious. The dwarves heaved Boholt up into the saddle. He was heavy and squat from the armour and the leather pads he was wearing. Gar and Beanpole were already mounted, holding huge two-handed swords across their saddles. Right, Boholt rasped. Let's have at him. Oh, no, said a deep voice, sounding like a brass trumpet. I have come to you. From beyond the ring of boulders emerged a long snout shimmering with gold, a slender neck armed with a row of triangular serrated projections, and behind taloned feet. The evil reptilian eyes with their vertical pupils peered from beneath horned eyelids.
"I was tired of waiting in the open,"
the dragon Vilentretenmerth said, looking around.
"So I came myself. Fewer and fewer challenges, I see."
Boholt held the reins in his teeth and a longsword two-handed.
"That's not,"
he said indistinctly, holding the strap in his teeth.
"Still fight, Kyle."
"I am,"
the dragon said, arching its back and lifting its tail insultingly. Boholt looked around. Gar and Beanpole slowly, almost ostentatiously, calmly flanked the dragon. Yarpin Zigrin and his boys waited behind, holding battle-axes.
"Ah!"
Boholt roared, striking his horse hard with his heels and lifting his sword. The dragon curled up, flattened itself to the ground, and struck with its tail from above and behind, like a scorpion, hitting not Boholt but Gar, who was attacking from the side. Gar fell over with his horse amid a clanking, screaming, and neighing tumult. Boholt, charging at a gallop, struck with a terrible blow, but the dragon nimbly dodged the wide blade. The momentum of the gallop carried Boholt alongside the dragon's body. The dragon twisted, standing on its hind legs, and clawed Beanpole, tearing open his horse's belly and the rider's thigh with a single slash. Boholt, leaning far out from the saddle, managed to steer his horse around, pulling the reins with his teeth, and attacked once more. The dragon lashed its tail over the dwarves rushing towards it, knocking them all over, and then lunged at Boholt, en route, seemingly in passing, stamping vigorously on Beanpole, who was trying to get up. Boholt, jerking his head around, tried to steer his galloping horse, but the dragon was infinitely quicker and more agile. Cunningly stealing up on Boholt from the left in order to obstruct his swing, it struck with a taloned foot. The horse reared up and lurched over to one side. Boholt flew from the saddle, losing his sword and helmet, tumbling backwards onto the ground, banging his head against a rock.
"Run for it, lads! Up the hill!"
Yarpin Zigrin bellowed, outshouting the screams of Gar, who was pinned down by his horse. Beards fluttering, the dwarves dashed towards the rocks at a speed that belied their short legs. The dragon did not give chase. It sat calmly and looked around. Gar was thrashing and screaming beneath the horse. Boholt lay motionless. Beanpole was crawling towards the rocks, sideways, like a huge iron crab.
"Staggering," Doragaray whispered. "Staggering."
"Hey!" Dandelion struggled in his bonds, making the wagon shake. "What is it? Over there! Look!" A great cloud of dust could be seen on the eastern side of the gorge, and shouting, rattling, and the tramping of hooves quickly reached them. The dragon extended its neck to look. 3 large wagons full of armed men rolled onto the plain. Splitting up, they began to surround the dragon. Damn it! It's the constabulary and guilds from Bearfield, Dandelion called. They came around by the source of the Brer. Yes, it's them. Look, it's Sheepbagger, there at the front." The dragon lowered its head and gently pushed a small green-greyish mewling creature towards the wagon. Then it struck the ground with its tail, roared loudly, and shot like an arrow towards the encounter with the men of Bearfield. "What is it?" Yennefer asked. "That little thing crawling around in the grass, Geralt."
"It's what the dragon was protecting from us," the Witcher said. "That's what hatched some time ago in the cave, over there in the northern canyon. It's the dragonling from the egg of the dragon that Sheepbagger poisoned."
The dragonling, stumbling and dragging its bulging belly across the ground, scurried unsteadily over to the wagon, squealed, stood on its hind legs, stretched out its little wings, and then, without a second's thought, clung to the sorceress's side. Yennefer, with an extremely queer look on her face, sighed loudly.
"It likes you," Geralt murmured.
"He's young, but he ain't stupid." Dandelion, twisting in his fetters, grinned. "Look where he's stuck his snout. I'd like to be in his shoes, damn it. Hey, little one, run away. That's Yennefer, terror of dragons. And witches. Well, at least one witcher." "Quiet, Dandelion," Doragaray shouted. "Look over there, on the battlefield. They've got him, a pox on them." The Bearfield wagons, rumbling like war chariots, raced towards the attacking dragon. "Smack him!" Sheepbagger yelled, hanging on to the wagoner's back. "Smack him, kinsman, anywhere and anyhow. Don't hold back." The dragon nimbly eluded the first advancing wagon, flashing with scythe blades, forks, and spears, but ended up between the next two, from which a huge double fishing net pulled by straps dropped onto it. The dragon, fully enmeshed, fell down, rolled over, curled up in a ball, and spread its legs. The net tore to shreds with a sharp rending noise. More nets were thrown onto it from the first wagon, which had managed to turn around, this time utterly entangling the dragon. The two other wagons also turned back, dashed towards the dragon, rattling and bouncing over bumps. "You're caught in the net, you carp," Sheepbagger bawled, "and we'll soon scale you." The dragon roared and belched a cloud of steam into the sky. The Bearfield constables rushed towards him, spilling out of the wagons. The dragon bellowed again, desperately, with a thundering roar. From the northern canyon came a reply, a high-pitched battle cry. Out from the gorge, straining forward in a frenzied gallop, blonde plaits streaming, whistling piercingly, surrounded by the flickering flashes of sabres, charged the Zerricanians, the Witcher shouted, helplessly tugging at the ropes. "Oh, shit," Dandelion chimed in. "Geralt, do you understand?" The Zerricanians rode through the throng like hot knives through a barrel of butter, scattering their path with massacred corpses, and then leapt from their horses in full flight to stand beside the dragon struggling in the net. The first of the onrushing constables immediately lost his head. The second aimed a blow with his pitchfork at Via, but the Zerricanian, holding her sabre in both hands upside down, with the tip pointing towards the ground, slashed him open from crotch to sternum. The others beat a hurried retreat. "To the wagons!" Sheepbagger yelled. "To the wagons, kinsman! We'll crush them into the wagons!" "Geralt!" Yennefer suddenly shouted, pulling up her bound legs and pushing them with a sudden thrust under the wagon, beneath the arms of the Witcher, which were bound and twisted behind him. "The Igni sign! Make it! Can you feel the rope? Cast the bloody thing!" "Without looking," Geralt groaned. "I'll burn you, Yen. Make the sign! I can take it!" He obeyed, and felt a tingling in his fingers, which were forming the Igni sign, just above the sorceress's bound ankles. Yennefer turned her head away, biting down on her coat collar and stifling a moan. The dragonling, squealing, beat its wings beside her. "Yen, make it!" she bellowed. Her bonds gave way in an instant, as the disgusting, nauseating odour of charred skin became unbearable. Dorigere uttered a strange noise and fainted, suspended by his fetters from the wagon wheel. The sorceress, wincing with the pain, straightened up, lifting her now free leg. She screamed in a furious voice, full of pain and rage. The medallion on Geralt's neck jerked as though it were alive. Yennefer straightened her thigh, waved her foot towards the charging wagons of the Bearfield Constabulary, and shouted out a spell. The air crackled and gave off the smell of ozone. "Oh, ye gods!" Dandelion wailed in admiration. "What a ballad this will be, Yennefer!" The spell, cast by her shapely little foot, was not totally effective. The first wagon, and everything on it, took on the yellow colour of a kingcup, which the Bearfield soldiers, in the frenzy of battle, did not even notice. It did better with the second wagon, whose entire crew were transformed into huge, rough-skinned frogs, which hopped around in all directions, croaking comically. The wagon, now bereft of a driver, tipped over and fell apart. The horses, neighing hysterically, fled into the distance, dragging the broken shaft behind them. Yennefer bit her lip and waved her leg in the air again. The Kingcup yellow wagon suddenly dissolved into Kingcup yellow smoke, to the sound of lively musical tones drifting down from above, and its entire crew flopped onto the grass, stupefied, forming a picturesque heap. The wheels of the third wagon went from round to square, and the result was instant. The horses reared up, the wagon crashed over, and the Bearfield Constabulary were tipped out and thrown onto the ground. Yennefer, now driven by pure vindictiveness, flourished a leg ferociously and yelled out a spell, transforming the Bearfielders randomly into turtles, geese, woodlice, flamingos, and stripy piglets. The Zerricanians, expertly and methodically, finished off the rest. The dragon, having finally torn the nets to shreds, leapt up, flapped its wings, roared and hurtled, as straight as a ramrod, after the unharmed and fleeing Sheepbagger. Sheepbagger was dashing like a stag, but the dragon was faster. Geralt, seeing the gaping jaws and razor-sharp flashing teeth, turned his head away. He heard a gruesome scream and a revolting crunching sound. Dandelion gave a stifled shout. Yennefer, her face as white as a sheet, bent over double, turned to one side and vomited under the wagon. A silence fell, interrupted only by the occasional gaggling, croaking and squealing of the remains of the Bearfield constabulary. Vere, smiling unpleasantly, stood over Yennefer, legs wide apart. The Zerrikanian raised her sabre. Yennefer, pale, raised a leg. "No," said Borch, also known as Three Jackdaws, who was sitting on a stone. In his lap, he was holding the dragonling, peaceful and content. "We aren't going to kill Madame Yennefer," the dragon Villain-Tretenmirth repeated. "It is over. What is more, we are grateful to Madame Yennefer for her invaluable assistance. Release them, Vere." "Do you understand, Geralt?" Dandelion whispered, chafing feeling back into his numb arms. "Do you understand? There's an ancient ballad about a golden dragon. A golden dragon can assume any form it wishes," Geralt muttered. "Even that of a human. I've heard that too, but I didn't believe it." "Yapin Zigrin, sir," Villain-Tretenmirth called to the dwarf, who was hanging onto a vertical rock 20 ells above the ground. "What are you looking for there? Marmots? Not your favourite dish, if memory serves me. Climb down and busy yourself with the reavers. They need help. There won't be any more killing. Of anybody." Dandelion, casting anxious glances at the Zerrikanians, who were vigilantly patrolling the battlefield, was still trying to revive the unconscious Dorigaray. Geralt was dressing Yennefer's scorched ankles and rubbing ointment into them. The sorceress was hissing with pain and mumbling spells. Having completed his task, the Witcher stood up. "Stay here," he said. "I have to talk to him." Yennefer stood up, wincing. "I'm going with you, Geralt," she said, linking her arm in his. "May I? Please, Geralt?" "With me, Yen? I thought—" "Don't think." She pressed herself against his arm. "Yen? It's all right, Geralt." He looked into her eyes, which were warm, as they used to be. He lowered his head and kissed her lips, hot, soft, and willing, as they used to be. They walked over. Yennefer, held up by Geralt, curtsied low as though before a king, holding her dress in her fingertips. "Three Jack... Villain-Tretenmirth," the Witcher said. "My name, when freely translated into your language, means 3 black birds," the dragon said. The dragonling, little claws digging into his forearm, arched its back to be stroked. "Chaos and order." Villain-Tretenmirth smiled. "Do you remember, Geralt? Chaos is aggression, order its protection against it. It's worth rushing to the ends of the world to oppose aggression and evil, isn't it, Witcher? Particularly, as you said, when the pay is fair. And this time it was. It was the treasure hoard of the she-dragon Mirgta, the one poisoned outside Bearfield. She summoned me to help her, to stop the evil threatening her. Mirgta flew away soon after Ike of Denezle was removed from the battlefield. She had sufficient time while you were talking and quarrelling. But she left me her treasure as my payment." The dragonling squealed and flapped its little wings. "So you—" "That is right," the dragon interrupted. "Well, it's the times we live in. For some time, creatures, which you usually call monsters, have been feeling more and more under threat from people. They can no longer cope by themselves. They need a defender, some kind of Witcher." "And the destination? The goal at the end of the road?" "This is it." Villain-Tretenmirth lifted his forearm. The dragonling squealed in alarm. "I've just attained it. Owing to him, I shall survive, Geralt of Rivia. I shall prove there are no limits of possibility. One day, you will also find such a purpose, Witcher. Even those who are different can survive. Farewell, Geralt. Farewell, Yennefer. The sorceress, grasping the witch's arm more firmly, curtsied again. Wieland Tretenmeth stood up and looked at her, and his expression was very serious. Forgive me my frankness and forthrightness, Yennefer. It is written all over your faces. I don't even have to try to read your thoughts. You were made for each other, you and the Witcher. But nothing will come of it. Nothing. I'm sorry. I know. Yennefer blanched slightly. I know, Wieland Tretenmeth. But I would also like to believe there are no limits of possibility. Or at least, I would like to believe that they are still very far away. Via walked over, touched Geralt's shoulder, and quickly uttered a few words. The dragon laughed. Geralt, Via says she will long remember the tub at the Pensive Dragon. She hopes we'll meet again some day. What? Yennefer answered, narrowing her eyes. Nothing, the Witcher said quickly. Wieland Tretenmeth. Yes, Geralt of Rivia? You can assume any form, any that you wish. Indeed. Why then a man? Why Borch, with 3 black birds on his coat of arms? The dragon smiled cheerfully. I don't know, Geralt, in what circumstances the distant ancestors of our races encountered one another for the first time, but the fact is that for dragons, there is nothing more repugnant than man. Man arouses instinctive, irrational disgust in a dragon. With me, it's different. To me, you're likable. Farewell. It was not a gradual, blurred transformation, or a hazy, pulsating trembling as with an illusion. It was as sudden as the blink of an eye. Where a second before had stood a curly-haired knight in a tunic decorated with 3 black birds, now sat a golden dragon, gracefully extending its long, slender neck. Inclining its head, the dragon spread its wings, dazzlingly gold in the sunshine. Yennefer sighed loudly. Via, already mounted beside Tyr, waved. Via, the Witcher said. You were right. Hmm? He is the most beautiful. A Shard of Ice. Chapter 1. The dead sheep, swollen and bloated, its stiff legs pointing towards the sky, moved. Geralt, crouching by the wall, slowly drew his sword, careful not to let the blade grate against the scabbard. 10 paces from him, a pile of refuse suddenly arched up and heaved. The Witcher straightened and jumped before the wave of stench emanating from the disturbed midden reached him. A tentacle, ending in a rounded, tapering protuberance, bristling with spikes, suddenly shot out from under the rubbish, hurtling out towards him at incredible speed. The Witcher landed surely on the remains of a broken piece of furniture, tottering on a pile of rotten vegetables, swayed, regained his balance, and slashed the tentacle with a short blow of his sword, cutting off the tentacular club. He sprang back at once, but this time slipped from the boards and sank up to his thighs in the boggy midden. The rubbish heap erupted, throwing up viscous, foul-smelling slime, fragments of pots, rotten rags, and pale threads of sauerkraut, and from beneath it all burst an enormous, bulbous body, as deformed as a grotesque potato, lashing the air with 3 tentacles and the stump of a 4th. Geralt, trapped and immobilized, struck with a broad twist of his hips, smoothly hacking off another tentacle. The remaining 2, as thick as tree boughs, fell on him with force, plunging him more deeply into the waist. The body glided towards him, ploughing into the midden like a barrel being dragged along. He saw the hideous bulbous shape snap open, gaping, with a wide maw full of large, lumpish teeth. He let the tentacles encircle his waist, pull him with a squelch from the stinking slime, and drag him towards the body, now boring into the refuse heap with circular movements. The toothed maw snapped savagely and ferociously. Having been dragged close to the dreadful jaws, the Witcher struck with his sword, 2-handed, the blade biting smoothly and easily. The obnoxious, sweetish odour took his breath away. The monster hissed and shuddered, and the tentacles released their grip, flapping convulsively in the air. Geralt, bogged down in the refuse, slashed again backhanded, the blade repulsively crunching and grating on the bared teeth. The creature gurgled and drooped, but immediately swelled, hissing, vomiting putrid slime over the Witcher. Keeping his balance with strenuous movements of his legs, still stuck in the muck, Geralt broke free and lunged forward, cleaving the refuse with his chest like a swimmer moving through water, and struck with all his strength from above, powerfully bearing down on the blade as it cut into the body between the weakly glowing eyes. The monster groaned, flapped around, unfolding onto the pile of muck like a punctured bladder, emitting palpable warm gusts of stench. The tentacles twitched and writhed among the rubbish. The Witcher clambered out of the treacly slime and stood on slippery but hard ground. He felt something sticky and revolting which had got into his boot, crawling over his calf. To the well, he thought. Wash it off. Wash off all the repulsiveness as soon as possible. Wash myself. The creature's tentacles flapped on the refuse one last time, sloppy and wet, and then stopped moving. A star fell. A brief flash of lightning illuminating the black firmament, flecked with unmoving dots of light. The Witcher made no wish. He was breathing heavily, wheezing, and feeling the effects of the elixirs he had drunk before the fight wearing off. The gigantic heap of rubbish and waste piled up against the town walls, descending steeply towards the glistening ribbon of the river, looked pretty and alluring in the starlight. The Witcher spat. The monster was dead, now part of the midden where it had dwelled. Another star fell. A garbage heap, the Witcher said with effort. Muck, filth and shit. Chapter 2. You reek, Geralt. Yennefer grimaced, not turning from the mirror, where she was cleaning off the colouring from her eyelids and eyelashes. Take a bath. There's no water, he said, looking into the tub. We shall remedy that. The sorceress stood up and threw the window open. Do you prefer seawater or fresh water? Seawater for a change. Yennefer spread her arms vigorously and shouted a spell, making a brief, intricate movement with her hands. Suddenly, a sharp, wet coldness blew in through the open window. The shutters juddered, and a green cloud gushed into the room with a hiss, billowing in an irregular sphere. The tub foamed with water, rippling turbulently, banging against the edges and splashing onto the floor. The sorceress sat down and resumed her previously interrupted activity. How did it go? She asked. What was it on the midden? A Zeugl, as I suspected, Geralt said, pulling off his boots, discarding his clothes, and lowering a foot into the tub. Bloody hell, Yen, that's cold. Can't you heat the water? No. The sorceress, moving her face towards the looking-glass and instilling something into her eye, using a thin glass rod. That spell is bloody wearying and makes me feel sick, and the cold will do you good after the elixirs. Geralt did not argue. There was absolutely no point arguing with Yennefer. Did the Zeugl cause you any problems? The sorceress dipped the rod into a vial and dropped something into her other eye, twisting her lips comically. Not particularly. From outside the open window, there was a thud, the sharp crack of wood breaking, and an inarticulate voice, tunelessly and incoherently repeating the chorus of a popular, obscene song. A Zeugl, said the sorceress, as she reached for another vial from the impressive collection on the table and removed the cork from it. The fragrance of lilac and gooseberries filled the room. Well, well. Even in a town it's easy for a witcher to find work. You don't have to roam through the wilds at all. You know, Istredd maintains its becoming a general rule. The place of every creature from the forests and swamps that becomes extinct is occupied by something else, some new mutation, adapted to the artificial environment created by people. As usual, Geralt winced at the mention of Istredd. He was beginning to be sick of Yennefer's admiration for Istredd's brilliance, even if Istredd was right. Istredd is right, Yennefer continued, applying the lilac and gooseberry-perfumed something to her cheeks and eyelids. Look for yourself. Pseudo-rats in sewers and cellars, Zeugls in rubbish dumps, Neocoryces in polluted moats and sewers, Tagirs in mill ponds. It's virtually symbiosis, don't you think?
And ghouls in cemeteries devouring corpses the day after the funeral, he thought, rinsing off the soap. Total symbiosis.
Yes.
The sorceress put aside the vials and jars.
Witches can be kept busy in towns too. I think one day you'll settle in a city for good, Geralt.
I'd rather drop dead, he thought, but he did not say it aloud. Contradicting Yennefer, as he knew, inevitably led to a fight, and a fight with Yennefer was not the safest thing.
Have you finished, Geralt?
Yes.
Get out of the tub.
Without getting up, Yennefer carelessly waved a hand and uttered a spell. The water from the tub, including everything which had spilled onto the floor or was dripping from Geralt, gathered itself with a swoosh into a translucent sphere and whistled through the window. He heard a loud splash.
"The pox on you, Horsens!"
An infuriated yell rang out from below.
"If you know where to pour away your piss, I bloody hope you're eaten alive by lice. Catch the ruddy pox and croak."
The sorceress closed the window. "Damn it, Yen," the Witcher chuckled. "You could have chucked the water somewhere else."
I could have, she purred, but I didn't feel like it.
She took the oil lamp from the table and walked over to him. The white nightdress, clinging to her body as she moved, made her tremendously appealing. More so than if she were naked, he thought.
"I want to look you over," she said. "The Zeugel might have injured you."
"It didn't. I would have felt it."
"After the elixirs? Don't be ridiculous. After the elixirs, you wouldn't even have felt an open fracture until the protruding bones started snagging on hedges. And there might have been anything on the Zeugel, including tetanus and cadaveric poison. If anything happens, there's still time for countermeasures. Turn around."
He felt the soft warmth of the lamp's flame on his body and the occasional brushing of her hair.
"Everything seems to be in order," she said. "Lie down before the elixirs knock you off your feet. Those mixtures are devilishly dangerous. They'll destroy you in the end."
"I have to take them before I fight." Yennefer did not answer. She sat down at the looking-glass once more and slowly combed her black, curly, shimmering locks. She always combed her hair before going to bed. Geralt found it peculiar, but he adored watching her doing it. He suspected Yennefer was aware of it. He suddenly felt very cold, and the elixirs indeed jolted him, numbed the nape of his neck, and swirled around the bottom of his stomach in vortices of nausea. He cursed under his breath and fell heavily onto the bed, without taking his eyes off Yennefer. A movement in the corner of the chamber caught his attention. A smallish, pitch-black bird sat on a set of antlers nailed crookedly to the wall and festooned in cobwebs. Glancing sideways, it looked at the Witcher with a yellow, fixed eye. "What's that, Yen? How did it get here?"
"What?"
Yennefer turned her head.
"Oh, that? It's a kestrel."
"A kestrel? Kestrels are rufous and speckled, and that one's black."
"It's an enchanted kestrel. I made it."
"What for?"
"I need it."
She cut him off. Geralt did not ask any more questions, knowing that Yennefer would not answer. "Are you seeing Istreth tomorrow?" The sorceress moved the vials to the edge of the table, put her comb into a small box, and closed the side panels of the looking-glass.
"Yes. First thing. Why?"
"Nothing." She lay down beside him without snuffing out the lamp. She never doused lights. She could not bear to fall asleep in the dark. Whether an oil lamp, a lantern, or a candle, it had to burn right down. Always. One more foible. Yennefer had a remarkable number of foibles. "Yen?"
"Uh-huh."
"When are we leaving?"
"Don't be tedious."
She tugged the eiderdown sharply.
"We've only been here 3 days, and you've asked that question at least 30 times. I've told you. I have things to deal with."
"With Istreth?"
"Yes."
He sighed and embraced her, not concealing his intentions.
"Hey," she whispered, "you've taken elixirs."
"What of it?"
"Nothing."
She giggled like a schoolgirl, cuddling up to him, arching her body and lifting herself to allow her nightdress to slip off. As usual, the delight in her nakedness coursed in a shudder down his back and tingled in his fingers as they touched her skin. His lips touched her breasts, rounded and delicate,
with nipples so pale they were visible only by their contours. He entwined his fingers in her hair, her lilac and gooseberry perfumed hair. She succumbed to his caresses, purring like a cat, rubbing her bent knee against his hip. It rapidly turned out, as usual, that he had overestimated his stamina regarding the Witcher elixirs, had forgotten about their disagreeable effects on his body. But perhaps it's not the elixirs, he thought. Perhaps it's exhaustion brought on by fighting, risks, danger and death. Exhaustion which has simply become routine. But my body, even though artificially enhanced, doesn't succumb to routine. It reacts naturally. Just not when it's supposed to, damn it. But Yennefer, as usual, was not discouraged by a mere trifle. He felt her touch him, heard her purr right by his ear. As usual, he involuntarily pondered over the colossal number of occasions she must have used that most practical of spells. And then he stopped pondering. As usual, it was anything but ordinary. He looked at her mouth, at its corners twitching in an unwitting smile. He knew that smile well. It always seemed to him more one of triumph than of happiness. He had never asked her about it. He knew she would not answer. The black kestrel sitting on the antlers beat its wings and snapped its curved beak. Yennefer turned her head away and sighed, very sadly. Yen? It's nothing, Geralt, she said, kissing him. It's nothing. The oil lamp glimmered and flickered. A mouse was scratching in the wall, and a Deathwatch beetle in the dresser clicked softly, rhythmically and monotonously. Yen? Let's get away. I feel bad here. This town has an awful effect on me. She turned over on her side, ran a hand across his cheek, brushing some strands of hair away. Her fingers travelled downwards, touching the coarse scars marking the side of his neck. Do you know what the name of this town means? Aidh Gainvir. No. Is it in the elven speech? Yes. It means a shard of ice. Somehow it doesn't suit this lousy dump. Among the elves, the sorceress whispered pensively, there is a legend about a winter queen who travels the land during snowstorms in a sleigh drawn by white horses. As she rides, she casts hard, sharp, tiny shards of ice around her, and woe betide anyone whose eye or heart is pierced by one of them. That person is then lost. No longer will anything gladden them. They find anything that doesn't have the whiteness of snow ugly, obnoxious, repugnant. They will not find peace, will abandon everything, and will set off after the queen in pursuit of their dream and love. Naturally, they will never find it, and will die of longing. Apparently, here, in this town, something like that happened in times long gone. It's a beautiful legend, isn't it? Elves can couch everything in pretty words, he muttered drowsily, running his lips over her shoulder. It's not a legend at all, Yen. It's a pretty description of the hideous phenomenon that is the Wild Hunt, the curse of several regions, an inexplicable collective madness, compelling people to join a spectral cavalcade rushing across the sky. I've seen it. Indeed, it often occurs during the winter. I was offered rather good money to put an end to that blight, but I didn't take it. There's no way of dealing with the Wild Hunt. Witcher, she whispered, kissing his cheek. There's no romance in you, and I like elven legends. They are so captivating. What a pity humans don't have any legends like that. Perhaps one day they will. Perhaps they'll create some. But what would human legends deal with? All around, wherever one looks, there's greyness and dullness. Even things which begin beautifully lead swiftly to boredom and dreariness, to that human ritual, that wearisome rhythm called life. Oh, Geralt. It's not easy being a sorceress, but comparing it to mundane, human existence... Geralt? She laid her head on his chest, which was rising and falling, with slow breathing. Sleep, she whispered. Sleep, Witcher. Chapter 3. The town was having a bad effect on him. Since first thing that morning, everything was spoiling his mood, making him dejected and angry. Everything. It annoyed him that he had overslept, so the morning had become to all intents and purposes the afternoon. He was irritated by the absence of Yennefer, who had left before he woke up. She must have been in a hurry, because the paraphernalia she usually neatly put away in boxes was lying on the table, randomly strewn like dice cast by a soothsayer performing a prophecy ritual. Brushes made from delicate horsehair, the large ones used for powdering her face, the smaller ones which she used to apply lipstick to her mouth, and the utterly tiny ones were the henna she used to dye her eyelashes. Pencils and sticks for her eyelids and eyebrows, delicate silver tweezers and spoons, small jars and bottles made of porcelain and milky glass, containing, as he knew, elixirs and balms with ingredients as banal as soot, goose grease and carrot juice, and as menacingly mysterious as mandrake, antimony, belladonna, cannabis, dragon's blood, and the concentrated venom of the giant scorpion. And above all of that, all around, in the air, the fragrance of lilac and gooseberry, the scent she always used. She was present in those objects. She was present in the fragrance. But she was not there. He went downstairs feeling anxiety and anger welling up in him, about everything. He was annoyed by the cold, congealed scrambled egg he was served for breakfast by the innkeeper, who tore himself away for a moment from groping a girl in the kitchen. He was annoyed that the girl was no more than 12 years old and had tears in her eyes. The warm spring weather and cheerful chatter of the vibrant streets did not improve Geralt's mood. He still did not enjoy being in Aedhgainville, a small town which he deemed to be a nasty parody of all the small towns he knew. It was grotesquely noisier, dirtier, more oppressive and more irritating. He could still smell the faint stench of the midden on his clothes and in his hair. He decided to go to the bathhouse. In the bathhouse, he was annoyed by the expression of the attendant, looking at his Witcher medallion and his sword lying on the edge of the tub. He was annoyed by the fact that the attendant did not offer him a whore. He had no intention of availing himself of one, but in bathhouses everybody was offered them, so he was annoyed by the exception being made for him. When he left, smelling strongly of lye ash soap, his mood had not improved, and Aedhgainville was no more attractive. There was still nothing there that he could find to like. The Witcher did not like the piles of sloppy manure filling the narrow streets. He did not like the beggars squatting against the wall of the temple. He did not like the crooked writing on the wall reading, "Elves to the reservation." He was not allowed to enter the castle. Instead, they sent him to speak to the mayor in the Merchants' Guild. That annoyed him. He was also annoyed when the dean of the guild, an elf, ordered him to search for the mayor in the marketplace, looking at him with a curious contempt and superiority for someone who was about to be sent to a reservation. The marketplace was teeming with people. It was full of stalls, carts, wagons, horses, oxen, and flies. On a platform stood a pillory with a criminal being showered by the throng in mud and dung. The criminal, with admirable composure, showered his tormentors with vile abuse, making little effort to raise his voice. For Geralt, who possessed considerable refinement, the mayor's reason for being among this clamour was absolutely clear. The visiting merchants from caravans included bribes in their prices, and thus had to give someone the bribes. The mayor, well aware of this custom, would appear to ensure that the merchants would not have to go to any trouble. The place from which he officiated was marked by a dirty blue canopy supported on poles. Beneath it stood a table besieged by vociferous applicants. Mayor Herbolth sat behind the table, displaying on his faded face scorn and disdain to all and sundry. "Hey, where might you be going?" Geralt slowly turned his head. He instantly suppressed the anger he felt inside, overcame his annoyance, and froze into a cold, hard shard of ice. He could not allow himself to become emotional. The man who stopped him had hair as yellow as oriole feathers and the same colour eyebrows over pale, empty eyes. His slim, long-fingered hands were resting on a belt made from chunky brass plates, weighed down by a sword, mace, and 2 daggers. "Aha," the man said. "I know you. The Witcher, isn't it? To see her both." Geralt nodded, watching the man's hands the whole time. He knew it would be dangerous to take his eyes off them. "I've heard of you, the bane of monsters," said the yellow-haired man, also vigilantly observing Geralt's hands. "Well, I don't think we've ever met. You must have heard of me. I'm Ivo Meus, but everyone calls me Cicada." The Witcher nodded to indicate he had heard of him. He also knew the price that had been offered for Cicada's head in Vitsima, Kelf and Vatvir. Had he been asked his opinion, he would have said it was a low price, but he had not been asked. "Very well," Cicada said. "The mayor, from what I know, is waiting for you. You may go on. But you leave your sword, friend. I'm paid here, mark you, to make sure etiquette is observed. No one is allowed to approach Herbolth with a weapon. Understood?" Geralt shrugged indifferently, unfastened his belt, wrapped it around the scabbard, and handed the sword to Cicada. Cicada raised the corners of his mouth in a smile. "Well, well," he said. "How meek! Not a word of protest. I knew the rumours about you were exaggerated. I'd like you to ask for my sword one day, then you'd see my answer." "Hi, Cicada," the mayor called, getting up. "Let him through. Come here, Lord Geralt. Look lively. Greetings to you. Step aside, my dear merchants. Leave us for a moment. Your business dealings must yield to wishes of greater note for the town. Submit your entreaties to my secretary." The sham geniality of the greeting did not deceive Geralt. He knew it served exclusively as a bargaining ploy. The merchants were being given time to worry whether their bribes were sufficiently high. "I'll wager Cicada tried to provoke you," Herbolth said, raising his hand nonchalantly in response to the witch's equally nonchalant nod. "Don't fret about it. Cicada only draws his weapon when ordered to. True, it's not especially to his liking, but while I pay him, he has to obey, or to be out on his ear, back on the highway. Don't fret about it." "Why the hell do you need someone like Cicada, Mayor? Is it so dangerous here?" "It's not dangerous, because I'm paying Cicada." Herbolth laughed. "His fame goes before him, and that suits me well. You see, Garnveal and the other towns in the Dogbane Valley fall under the authority of the viceroys of Rakvarelin, and in recent times the viceroys have changed every season. No one knows why they keep changing, because anyway, every second one is a half-elf or quarter-elf, a cursed blood and race. Everything bad is the fault of the elves." Geralt did not add that it was also the fault of the Carters, because the joke, although well known, did not amuse everybody. "Every new viceroy," Herbolth continued in a huff, "begins by removing the castellans and mayors of the old regime in order to give his friends and relations jobs. But after what Cicada once did to the emissaries of a certain viceroy, no one tries to unseat me from my position anymore, and I'm the oldest mayor of the oldest regime. Which one, I can't even remember. Well, but we're sitting here chin-wagging, and we need to get on, as my late first wife was wont to say. Let's get to the point. What kind of creature had infested our muck heap?" "A Zoigl." "First time I've ever heard of anything like that. I trust it's dead." "It is." "How much will it cost the town treasury? 70? 100.
"Oh, really, Witcher, sir? You must have been drinking hemlock. 100 marks for killing a lousy worm that burrowed into a pile of shit."
"Worm or no worm, Mayor, it devoured 8 people, as you said yourself."
"People? Like that? The brute, so I'm informed, ate old Zacharek, who was famous for never being sober. One old bag from up near the castle, and several children of the ferryman Sulirad, which wasn't discovered very quickly, because Sulirad himself doesn't know how many children he has. He produces them too quickly to count them. People, my hat. 80.
Had I not killed the Zoigl, it would soon have devoured somebody more important. The apothecary, let us say. And then where would you get your canker ointment from? 100.
100 marks is a good deal of money. I don't know if I'd give that much for a 9-headed hydra. 85.
100, Mayor Herbolth. Mark that, although it wasn't a 9-headed hydra, no local man, including the celebrated cicada, was capable of dealing with a Zoigle. Because no local man is accustomed to slopping around in dung and refuse. This is my last word. 90. 100. 95, by all the demons and devils. Agreed.
Well, now,
Herbolth said, smiling broadly.
That's settled. Do you always bargain so famously, Witcher?
No. Geralt did not smile. Seldom, actually. But I wanted to give you the pleasure, Mayor.
And you did, a pox on you,
Herbolth cackled.
Hey, Peregrib, over here. Give me the ledger and a purse and count me out 90 marks at once.
It was supposed to be 95.
What about the tax?
The Witcher swore softly. The Mayor applied his sprawling mark to the receipt and then poked around in his ear with the clean end of the quill.
I trust things will be quiet on the muck heap now, eh, Witcher?
Ought to be. There was only one Zoigle, though there is a chance it managed to reproduce. Zoigles are hermaphroditic, like snails.
What poppycock is that?
Herbolth asked, looking askance at him.
You need two to reproduce. I mean, a male and a female. What, do those Zoigles hatch like fleas or mice from the rotten straw in a palliasse? Every dimwit knows that there aren't he-mice and she-mice, that they're all identical and hatch out of themselves from rotten straw.
And snails hatch from wet leaves, Secretary Peregrib interjected, still busy piling up coins. Everyone knows, Geralt concurred, smiling cheerfully. There aren't he-snails and she-snails. There are only leaves, and anyone who thinks differently is mistaken.
Enough,
the Mayor interrupted, looking at him suspiciously.
I've heard enough about vermin. I asked whether anything might hatch from the muck heap, so be so gracious as to answer clearly and concisely.
In a month or so, the midden ought to be inspected, ideally using dogs. Young Zoigles aren't dangerous.
Couldn't you do it, Witcher? We can come to an agreement about payment.
No, Geralt said, taking the money from Peregrib's hands. I have no intention of being stuck in your charming town for even a week, quite less a month.
Fascinating what you're telling me.
Herbolth smiled wryly, looking him straight in the eye.
Fascinating indeed, because I think you'll be staying here longer.
You think wrong, Mayor.
Really? You came here with that black-haired witch. What was it again? I forget. Guinevere, wasn't it? You've taken lodgings with her at the Sturgeon, in a single chamber, they say.
And what of it?
Well, whenever she comes to Eithgarn Vale, she does not leave so quickly. It's not the first time she's been here.
Peregrib smiled broadly, gap-toothed and meaningfully. Herbolth continued to look Geralt in the eye without smiling. Geralt also smiled as hideously as he could.
Actually, I don't know anything.
The Mayor looked away and bored his heel into the ground.
And it interests me as much as dog's filth. But the wizard Istrev is an important figure here, mark you. Indispensable to this municipality. Invaluable, I'd say. People hold him in high regard, locals and outsiders too. We don't stick our noses in his sorcery, and especially not in his other matters.
Wisely, perhaps, the Witcher agreed. And where does he live, if I may ask?
You don't know? Oh, that's right there. Do you see that house? That tall white one, stuck between the storehouse and the armoury, like, if you'll pardon the expression, a candle between two arse cheeks. But you won't find him there now. Not long ago, Istrev dug something up by the southern embankment and is now burrowing around there like a mole. And he's put some men to work on the excavation. I went over there and asked politely, why, master, are you digging holes like a child? Folk are beginning to laugh. What is in that ground there? And he looks at me like I'm some sort of pillock and says, history. What do you mean, history? I asks. And he goes, the history of humanity. Answers to questions, to the question of what there was and the question of what there will be. There was fuck all here, I says to that, except green fields, bushes and werewolves before they built the town. And what there will be depends on who they appoint Viceroy and rank Verelin, some lousy half-elf again. And there's no history in the ground. There's nothing there except possibly worms if someone's fond of angling. Do you think he listened? Fat chance. He's still digging. So, if you want to see him, go to the southern embankment.
Oh, come on, Mayor, Peregrib snorted. He's at home now. Why would he want to be at the diggings when he's...
Herbolth glanced at him menacingly. Peregrib bent over and cleared his throat, shuffling his feet. The Witcher, still smiling unpleasantly,
crossed his arms on his chest.
Yes, the mayor coughed. Who knows, perhaps his strength really is at home. After all, what does it—
Farewell, Mayor, Geralt said, not even bothering with an imitation of a bow. I wish you a good day. He went over to Cicada, who was coming out to meet him, his weapons clinking. Without a word, he held out his hand for his sword, which Cicada was holding in the crook of his elbow. Cicada stepped back.
In a hurry, Witcher?
Yes.
I've examined your sword.
Geralt shot a look at him, which, with the best will in the world, could not have been described as warm. That's quite something, he nodded. Not many have, and even fewer could boast about it.
Ho ho!
Cicada flashed his teeth.
That sounded so menacing it'd given me the shivers. It's always interested me, Witcher, why people are so afraid of you. And now I think I know.
I'm in a hurry, Cicada. Hand over the sword, if you don't mind.
Smoke in the eyes, Witcher. Nothing but smoke. You witchers frighten people like a beekeeper frightens his bees with smoke and stench, with your stony faces, with all your talk and those rumours, which you probably spread about yourselves. And the bees run from the smoke. Foolish things, instead of shoving their stings in the witch's arse, which will swell up like any other. They say you can't feel like people can. Well, that's lies. If one of you was properly stabbed, you'd feel it.
Have you finished?
Yes,
Cicada said, handing him back his sword.
Know what interests me, Witcher?
Yes, bees.
No. I was wondering, if you was to enter an alley with a sword from one side, and me from the other, who would come out the other side? I reckon it's worth a wager.
Why are you goading me, Cicada? Looking for a fight? What's it about?
Nothing. It just intrigues me how much truth there is in what folks say. That you're so good in a fight, you witches, because there's no heart, soul, mercy, or conscience in you. And that suffices? Because they say the same about me, for example, and not without reason. So, I'm terribly interested which of us, after going into that alley, would come out of it alive. What? Worth a wager? What do you think?
I said I'm in a hurry. I'm not here to waste time on your nonsense, and I'm not accustomed to betting. But if you ever decide to hinder me walking down an alley, take my advice, Cicada. Think about it first.
Smoke, Cicada smiled. Smoke in the eyes, Witcher. Nothing more. Till the next time. Who knows? Maybe in some alley.
Who knows?
Chapter 4. We'll be able to talk freely here. Sit down, Geralt. What was most conspicuous about the workshop was the impressive number of books. They took up most of the space in the large chamber. Bulky tomes filled the bookcases on the walls, weighed down shelves, and were piled high on chests and cabinets. The Witcher judged that they must have cost a fortune. Of course, neither was there any shortage of other typical elements of decor. A stuffed crocodile, dried porcupine fish hanging from the ceiling, a dusty skeleton, and a huge collection of jars full of alcohol containing, it seemed, every conceivable abomination. Centipedes, spiders, serpents, toads, and also countless human and non-human parts, mainly entrails. There was even a homunculus, or something that resembled a homunculus, but might just as likely have been a smoked newborn baby. The collection made no impression on Geralt, who had lived with Yennefer in Vengerberg for 6 months, and Yennefer had a yet more fascinating collection, even including a phallus of exceptional proportions, allegedly that of a mountain troll. She also possessed a very expertly stuffed unicorn, on whose back she liked to make love. Geralt was of the opinion that if there existed a place less suitable for having sex, it was probably only the back of a live unicorn. Unlike him, who considered his bed a luxury and valued all the possible uses of that marvellous piece of furniture, Yennefer was capable of being extremely extravagant. Geralt recalled some pleasant moments spent with the sorceress on a sloping roof, in a tree hollow full of rotten wood, on a balcony, someone else's to boot, on the railing of a bridge, in a wobbly boat on a rushing river, and levitating 30 fathoms above the earth. But the unicorn was the worst.
One happy day, however, the dummy broke beneath him, split and fell apart, supplying much amusement.
"What amuses you so much, Witcher?" Istreth asked, sitting down behind a long table overlaid with a considerable quantity of mouldy skulls, bones, and rusty ironware. "Whenever I see things like that," the Witcher said, sitting down opposite the sorcerer, pointing at the array of jars, "I wonder whether you really can't make magic without all that stomach-turning ghastliness." "It's a matter of taste," the sorcerer said, "and also of habit. What disgusts one person somehow doesn't bother another. And what, Geralt, repels you? I wonder what might disgust someone who, as I've heard, is capable of standing up to his neck in dung and filth. Please do not treat that question as insulting or provocative. I am genuinely fascinated to learn what might trigger a feeling of repugnance in a Witcher." "Does this jar, by any chance, contain the menstrual blood of an undefiled virgin, Istreth? Well, it disgusts me when I picture you, a serious sorcerer, with a phial in your hand, trying to obtain that precious liquid, drop by drop, kneeling, so to speak, at the very source." "Touché," Istreth said, smiling. "I refer, naturally, to your cutting wit, because as regards the jar's contents, you are wide of the mark. But you do use blood occasionally, don't you? You can't even contemplate some spells, I've heard, without the blood of a virgin. Ideally, one killed by a lightning bolt from a clear sky during a full moon. In what way, one wonders, is that blood better than that of an old strumpet who fell drunk from a palisade?" "In no way," the sorcerer agreed, a pleasant smile playing on his lips. "But if it became common knowledge that that role could actually be played just as easily by hog's blood, which is much easier to obtain, then the rabble would begin experimenting with spells. But if it means the rabble having to gather and use virgin's blood, dragon's tears, white tarantula's venom, decoction of severed baby's hands, or a corpse exhumed at midnight, many would think again." They were silent. Istreth, apparently deep in thought, tapped his fingernails on a cracked, browned skull which lacked its lower jaw, and ran his index finger over the serrated edge of a hole gaping in the temporal bone. Geralt observed him unobtrusively. He wondered how old the sorcerer might be. He knew that the more talented among them were capable of curbing the aging process permanently, and at any age they chose. Men preferred a mature age, suggesting knowledge and experience, for reasons of reputation and prestige. Women, like Yennefer, were concerned less with prestige and more with attractiveness. Istreth looked no older than a well-earned, robust 40. He had straight, slightly grizzled, shoulder-length hair and numerous wrinkles on his forehead, around his mouth and at the corners of his eyelids. Geralt did not know whether the profundity and wisdom in his benign grey eyes were natural or brought on by charms. A moment later, he concluded that it made no difference. "Istreth," he interrupted the awkward silence. "I came here because I wanted to see Yennefer. Even though she isn't here, you invited me inside. To talk. About what? About the rabble trying to break your monopoly on the use of magic. I know you include me among that rabble. That's nothing new to me. For a while I had the impression you would turn out to be different to your confreres, who have often entered into serious conversations with me, in order just to inform me that they don't like me." "I have no intention of apologizing to you for my, as you call them, confreres," the sorcerer answered calmly. "I understand them, for, just like them, in order to gain any level of proficiency at sorcery, I had to apply myself seriously. While still a mere stripling, when my peers were running around fields with bows, fishing or playing odds and evens, I was poring over manuscripts. My bones and joints ached from the stone floor in the tower, in the summer, of course, because in the winter the enamel on my teeth cracked. I would cough from the dust on old scrolls and books until my eyes bulged from their sockets, and my master, old Rödeskilde, never passed up an opportunity to flog me with a knout, clearly believing that without it I would not achieve satisfactory progress in my studies. I didn't enjoy soldiering or wenching or drinking during the years when all those pleasures taste the best." "Poor thing," the Witcher grimaced. "Indeed, it brings a tear to my eye." "Why the sarcasm? I'm trying to explain why sorcerers aren't fond of village quacks, charmers, healers, wise women, and witches. Call it what you will. even simple envy, but here lies the cause of the animosity. It annoys us when we see magic, a craft we were taught to treat as an elite art, a privilege of the few and a sacred mystery, in the hands of laymen and dilettantes. Even if it is shoddy, pitiable, derisory magic. That is why my confrères don't like you. Incidentally, I don't like you either. Geralt had had enough of the discussion, of pussyfooting around, of the feeling of anxiety which was crawling over the nape of his neck and his back like a snail. He looked straight into Istred's eyes and gripped the edge of the table. "It's about Yennefer, isn't it?" The sorcerer lifted his head, but continued to tap the skull on the table with his fingernails. "I commend your perspicacity," he said, steadily returning the witch's gaze. "My congratulations. Yes, it's about Yennefer." Geralt was silent. Once, years ago, many, many years ago, as a young witcher, he had been waiting to ambush a manticore, and he sensed the manticore approaching. He did not see or hear it. He sensed it. He had never forgotten that feeling, and now he felt exactly the same. "Your perspicacity," the sorcerer went on, "will save us a great deal of the time we would have wasted on further fudging, and this way the issue is out in the open." Geralt did not comment. "My close acquaintance with Yennefer," Istred continued, "goes back a long way, Witcher. For a long time it was an acquaintance without commitment, based on longer or shorter, more or less regular periods of time together. This kind of non-committal partnership is widely practiced among members of our profession. It's just that it suddenly stopped suiting me. I determined to propose to her that she remain with me permanently." "How did she respond?" "That she would think it over. I gave her time to do so. I know it is not an easy decision for her." "Why are you telling me this, Istred? What drives you, apart from this admirable but astonishing candour so rarely seen among members of your profession? What lies behind it?" "Prosaicness," the sorcerer sighed. "For you see, your presence hinders Yennefer in making a decision. I thus request you to remove yourself, to vanish from her life, to stop interfering. In short, that you get the hell out of here, ideally quietly and without saying goodbye, which, as she confided in me, you are wont to do." "Indeed?" Geralt smiled affectedly. "Your blunt sincerity astonishes me more and more. I might have expected anything but not such a request. Don't you think that instead of asking me, you ought rather to leap out and blast me with ball lightning? It'd be rid of the obstacle and there'd be just a little soot to scrape off the wall, an easier and more reliable method. Because, you see, a request can be declined, but ball lightning can't be. I do not countenance the possibility of your refusing." "Why not? Would this strange request be nothing but a warning preceding the lightning bolt, or some other cheerful spell? Or is this request to be supported by some weighty arguments? Or a sum which would stupefy an avaricious witcher? How much do you intend to pay me to get out of the path leading to your happiness?" The sorcerer stopped tapping the skull, placed his hand on it, and clenched his fingers around it. Geralt noticed his knuckles whitening. "I did not mean to insult you with an offer of that kind," he said. "I had no intention of doing so, but if... Geralt, I am a sorcerer, and not the worst. I wouldn't dream of feigning omnipotence here, but I could grant many of your wishes should you wish to voice them. Some of them as easily as this." He waved a hand, carelessly, as though chasing away a mosquito. The space above the table suddenly teemed with fabulously coloured Apollo butterflies. "My wish, Istred," the witcher drawled, shooing away the insects fluttering in front of his face, "is for you to stop pushing in between me and Yennefer. I don't care much about the propositions you're offering her. You could have proposed to her when she was with you, long ago, because then was then, and now is now. Now she is with me. You want me to get out of the way, make things easy for you? I decline. Not only will I not help you, but I'll hinder you, as well as my modest abilities allow. As you see, I'm your equal in candour.
You have no right to refuse me, not you.
What do you take me for, Istredd?
The sorcerer looked him in the eye and leaned across the table. A fleeting romance? A passing fascination, at best a whim, an adventure, of which Yenna has had hundreds, because Yenna loves to play with emotions. She's impulsive and unpredictable in her whims. That's what I take you for, since, having exchanged a few words with you, I've rejected the theory that she treats you entirely as an object. And believe me, that happens with her quite often.
You misunderstood the question.
You're mistaken. I didn't. But I'm intentionally talking solely about Yenna's emotions. For you are a witcher, and you cannot experience any emotions. You do not want to agree to my request because you think she matters to you. You think she... Geralt, you're only with her because she wants it, and you'll only be with her as long as she wants it. And what you feel is a projection of her emotions, the interest she shows in you. By all the demons of the netherworld, Geralt, you aren't a child. You know what you are. You're a mutant. Don't understand me wrongly. I don't say it to insult you or show you contempt. I merely state a fact. You're a mutant, and one of the basic traits of your mutation is utter insensitivity to emotions. You were created like that in order to do your job. Do you understand? You cannot feel anything. What you take for emotion is cellular, somatic memory, if you know what those words mean.
It so happens I do.
All the better. Then listen. I'm asking you for something which I can ask of a witcher, but which I couldn't ask of a man. I am being frank with a witcher. With a man, I couldn't afford to be frank. Geralt, I want to give Yenna understanding and stability, affection and happiness. Could you, hand on heart, pledge the same? No, you couldn't. Those are meaningless words to you. You trail after Yenna like a child, enjoying the momentary affection she shows you. Like a stray cat that everyone throws stones at. You purr, contented, because here is someone who's not afraid to stroke you. Do you understand what I mean? Oh, I know you understand. You aren't a fool, that's plain. You see yourself that you have no right to refuse me if I ask politely.
I have the same right to refuse as you have to ask, Geralt drawled, and in the process they cancel each other out. So, we return to the starting point, and that point is this. Yen, clearly not caring about my mutation and its consequences, is with me right now. You proposed to her. That's your right. She said she'd think it over. That's her right. Do you have the impression I'm hindering her in taking a decision? That she's hesitating? That I'm the cause of her hesitation? Well, that's my right. If she's hesitating, she clearly has reason for doing so. I must be giving her something, though perhaps the word is absent from the Witcher dictionary. Listen, no, you listen to me. She used to be with you, you say. Who knows? Perhaps it wasn't me, but you who was the fleeting romance, a caprice, a victim of those uncontrolled emotions so typical of her. Istredd, I cannot even rule out her treatment of you as completely objectionable. That, my dear sorcerer, cannot be ruled out just on the basis of a conversation. In this case, it seems to me, the object may be more relevant than eloquence. Istredd did not even flinch. He did not even clench his jaw. Geralt admired his self-control. None the less, the lengthening silence seemed to indicate that the blow had struck home. You're playing with words, the sorcerer said finally. You're becoming intoxicated with them. You try to substitute words for normal human feelings which you do not have. Your words don't express feelings, they are only sounds, like those that skull emits when you tap it. For you are just as empty as this skull. You have no right— Enough! Geralt interrupted harshly, perhaps even a little too harshly. Stop stubbornly denying me rights. I've had enough of it, do you hear? I told you our rights are equal. No, damn it, mine are greater. Really? The sorcerer said, paling somewhat, which caused Geralt unspeakable pleasure. For what reason? The Witcher wondered for a moment and decided to finish him off. For the reason, he shot back, that last night she made love with me and not with you. Istredd pulled the skull closer to himself and stroked it. His hand, to Geralt's dismay, did not even twitch. Does that, in your opinion, give you any rights?
Only one. The right to draw a few conclusions.
Ah, the sorcerer said slowly. Very well. As you wish. She made love with me this morning. Draw your own conclusions. You have the right. I already have. The silence lasted a long time. Geralt desperately searched for words. He found none. None at all.
This conversation is pointless,
he finally said, getting up, angry at himself because it sounded blunt and stupid.
I'm going.
Go to hell, Istredd said, equally bluntly, not looking at him. Chapter 5. When she entered, he was lying on the bed, fully dressed, with his hands under his head. He pretended to be looking at the ceiling. He looked at her. Yennefer slowly closed the door behind her. She was ravishing.
How ravishing she is, he thought. Everything about her is ravishing and menacing. Those colours of hers, that contrast of black and white, beauty and menace. Her raven black, natural curls. Her cheekbones pronounced, emphasizing a wrinkle which her smile, if she deigned to smile, created beside her mouth, wonderfully narrow and pale beneath her lipstick. Her eyebrows wonderfully irregular when she washed off the kohl that outlined them during the day. Her nose exquisitely too long, her delicate hands wonderfully nervous, restless and adroit. Her waist, willowy and slender, emphasized by an excessively tightened belt. Slim legs setting in motion the flowing shapes of her black skirt. Ravishing. She sat down at the table without a word, resting her chin on clasped hands. Very well, let's begin, she said. This growing dramatic silence is too banal for me. Let's sort this out. Get out of bed and stop staring at the ceiling looking upset. The situation is idiotic enough, and there's no point making it any more idiotic. Get up, I said. He got up obediently, without hesitation, and sat astride the stool opposite her. She did not avoid his gaze. He might have expected that. As I said, let's sort it out and sort it out quickly. In order not to put you in an awkward situation, I'll answer any questions at once. You don't even have to ask them. Yes, it's true that when I came with you to Gain Vale, I was coming to meet Istredd, and I knew I would go to bed with him. I didn't expect it to come out that you'd boast about it to each other. I know how you feel now, and I'm sorry about that, but no, I don't feel guilty. He said nothing. Yennefer shook her head, her shining black locks cascading from her shoulders. Geralt, say something. The Witcher cleared his throat. He calls you Yenna.
Yes, she said, not lowering her eyes. And I call him Val. It's his first name. Istredd is a nickname. I've known him for years. He's very dear to me. Don't look at me like that. You're also dear to me, and that's the whole problem.
Are you considering accepting his proposal?
For your information, I am. I told you we've known each other for years, for many years. We share common interests, goals, and ambitions. We understand each other wordlessly. He can give me support, and who knows, perhaps there'll come a day when I'll need it. And above all, he loves me, I think.
I won't stand in your way, Yen.
She tossed her head, and her violet eyes flashed with blue fire. In my way? Don't you understand anything, you idiot? If you'd been in my way, if you were bothering me, I'd have got rid of the obstacle in the blink of an eye. I'd have teleported you to the end of Cape Bremervoord or transported you to the land of Han in a whirlwind. With a bit of effort, I'd have embedded you in a piece of quartz and put you in the garden in a bed of peonies. I could have purged your brain such that you would have forgotten who I was and what my name was. I could have done all that had I felt like it. But I could also have simply said, it was agreeable, farewell. I could have quietly taken flight, as you once did when you fled my house in Vengerberg. Don't shout, Yen. Don't be aggressive, and don't drag up that story from Vengerberg. We swore not to go back to it after all. I don't bear a grudge against you, Yen. I'm not reproaching you, am I? I know you can't be judged by ordinary standards, and the fact that I'm saddened, the fact that I know I'm losing you is cellular memory. The atavistic remnants of feelings in a mutant purged of emotion. I can't stand it when you talk like that, she exploded. I can't bear it when you use that word. Don't ever use it again in my presence. Never. Does it change the fact? After all, I am a mutant. There is no fact. Don't utter that word in front of me.
The black kestrel sitting on the stag's antlers flapped its wings and scratched the perch with its talons. Geralt glanced at the bird, at its motionless yellow eye. Once again, Yennefer rested her chin on clasped hands.
Yen. Yes, Geralt.
You promised to answer my questions. Questions I don't even have to ask. One remains. The most important. The one I've never asked you, which I've been afraid to ask. Answer it.
I'm incapable of it, Geralt, she said firmly.
I don't believe you, Yen. I know you too well.
No one can know a sorceress well.
Answer my question, Yen.
My answer is, I don't know. But what kind of answer is that?
They were silent. The din from the street had diminished, calmed down. The sun, setting in the west, blazed through the slits of the shutters and pierced the chamber with slanting beams of light.
I've gone Vale, the Witcher muttered. A shard of ice. I felt it. I knew this town was hostile to me, evil. I've gone Vale, she repeated slowly. The slay of the Elf Queen. Why? Why, Geralt? I'm travelling with you, Yen, because the harness of my sleigh got entangled, caught up in your runners. And the blizzard is all around me, and the frost. It's cold. Warmth would melt the shard of ice in you, the shard I stabbed you with, she whispered. Then the spell would be broken, and you would see me as I really am. Then lash your white horses, Yen. May they race north, where a thaw never sets in. I hope it never sets in. I want to get to your ice castle as quickly as I can. That castle doesn't exist, Yennefer said, her mouth twitching. She grimaced. It's a symbol, and our sleigh ride is the pursuit of a dream which is unattainable. For I, the Elf Queen, desire warmth. That is my secret, which is why every year my sleigh carries me amidst a blizzard through some little town, and every year someone dazzled by my spell gets their harness caught in my runners. Every year someone new. Endlessly. Because the warmth I so desire at the same time blights the spell, blights the magic and the charm. My sweetheart, stabbed with that little icy star, suddenly becomes an ordinary nobody, and I become, in his thought-out eyes, no better than all the other mortal women.
And from under the unblemished whiteness emerges spring, he said. Emerges Aedhgain Vale, an ugly little town with a beautiful name. Aedhgain Vale and its muck-heap, that enormous, stinking pile of garbage which I have to enter because they pay me to, because I was created to enter filth which fills other people with disgust and revulsion. I was deprived of the ability to feel, so I wouldn't be able to feel how dreadfully vile is that vileness.
so I wouldn't retreat from it, wouldn't run horror-stricken from it. Yes, I was stripped of feelings. But not utterly. Whoever did it made a botch of it, Yen. They were silent. The black kestrel rustled its feathers, unfurling and folding its wings.
Geralt?
Yes, Yen.
Now you answer my question. The question I've never asked you, the one I've always feared. I won't ask you it this time either, but answer it, because I greatly desire to hear your answer. It's the one word, the only word you've never told me. Utter it, Geralt. Please.
I cannot, Yen.
Why not?
You don't know.
He smiled sadly.
My answer would just be a word. A word which doesn't express a feeling, doesn't express an emotion, because I'm bereft of them. A word which will be nothing but the sound made when you strike a cold, empty skull.
She looked at him in silence. Her eyes, wide open, assumed an ardent violet colour. No, Geralt, she said, that's not the truth. Or perhaps it is, but not the whole truth. You aren't bereft of feeling. Now I see it. Now I know you.
She was silent. Complete the sentence, Yen. You decided. Don't lie. I know you. I can see it in your eyes.
She did not lower her eyes.
He knew.
Yen, he whispered. Give me your hand, she said. She took his hand between hers, and at once he felt a tingling and the pulsing of blood in the veins of his forearm. Yennefer whispered a spell in a serene, measured voice, but he saw the beads of sweat which the effort caused to stipple her pale forehead, saw her pupils dilate in pain. Releasing his arm, she extended her hands and moved them, smoothing an invisible shape with tender strokes, slowly from top to bottom. The air between her fingers began to congeal and become turbid, swell and pulsate like smoke. He watched in fascination. Creational magic, considered the most elevated accomplishment among sorcerers, always fascinated him, much more than illusions or transformational magic. Yes, Ystreth was right, he thought. In comparison with this kind of magic, my signs just look ridiculous. The form of a bird, as black as coal, slowly materialized between Yennefer's hands, which were trembling with effort. The sorceress's fingers gently stroked the ruffled feathers, the small, flattened head and curved beak. One more hypnotically fluid, delicate movement, and a black kestrel, turning its head, cried loudly. Its twin, still sitting motionless on the antlers, gave an answering cry. 2 kestrels, Geralt said softly. 2 black kestrels created by magic. I presume you need them both. You presume right, she said with effort. I need them both. I was wrong to believe one would suffice. How wrong I was, Geralt. To what an error the vanity of the Ice Queen, convinced of her omnipotence, has brought me. For there are some things which there is no way of obtaining even by magic. And there are gifts which may not be accepted if one is unable to reciprocate them with something equally precious. Otherwise such a gift will slip through the fingers, melt like a shard of ice gripped in the hand. Then only regret, the sense of loss and hurt will remain. Yen, I am a sorceress, Geralt. The power over matter which I possess is a gift, a reciprocated gift. For it, I paid with everything I possessed. Nothing remained. He said nothing.
The sorceress wiped her forehead with a trembling hand. "I was mistaken," she repeated. "But I shall correct my mistake. Emotions and feelings." She touched the black kestrel's head. The bird fluffed up its feathers and silently opened its curved beak. "Emotions, whims and lies, fascinations and games, feelings and their absence, gifts which may not be accepted, lies and truth. What is truth? The negation of lies? Or the statement of a fact? And if the fact is a lie, what then is the truth? Who is full of feelings which torment him, and who is the empty carapace of a cold skull? Who? What is truth, Geralt? What is the essence of truth?" "I don't know, Yen. Tell me." "No," she said, and lowered her eyes for the first time. He had never seen her do that before. Never. "No," she repeated. "I cannot, Geralt. I cannot tell you that. That bird, begotten from the touch of your hand, will tell you. Bird, what is the essence of truth?" "Truth," the kestrel said, "is a shard of ice." Chapter 6. Although it seemed to him he was roaming the streets aimlessly and purposelessly, he suddenly found himself at the southern wall by the excavations, among the network of trenches crisscrossing the ruins by the stone wall and wandering in zigzags among the exposed squares of ancient foundations. Istreth was there, dressed in a smock with rolled-up sleeves and high boots. He was shouting instructions to his servants, who were digging with hoes into the coloured stripes of earth, clay and charcoal which made up the walls of the excavation. Alongside, on planks, lay blackened bones, shards of pots and other objects, unidentifiable, corroded and gnarled into rusty lumps. The sorcerer noticed him immediately. After giving the workers some loud instructions, he jumped out of the trench and walked over, wiping his hands on his breeches. "Yes? What is it?" he asked bluntly. The Witcher, standing in front of him without moving, did not answer. The servants, pretending to work, watched them attentively, whispering among themselves. "You're almost bursting with hatred." Istreth grimaced. "What is it?" I asked. "Have you decided? Where's Yenna? I hope she—" "Don't hope too much, Istreth." "Oh-ho," the sorcerer said. "What do I hear in your voice? Is it what I sense it is?" "And what is it you sense?" Istreth placed his fists on his hips and looked at the Witcher provocatively. "Let's not deceive ourselves, Geralt," he said. "I hate you, and you hate me. You insulted me by saying that Yennefer— You know what. I came back with a similar insult. You're in my way, and I'm in your way. Let's solve this like men. I don't see any other solution. That's why you've come here, isn't it?" "Yes," Geralt said, rubbing his forehead. "That's right, Istreth. That's why I came here, undeniably." "Indeed. It cannot go on like this. Only today did I learn that for several years Yenna has been circulating between us like a rag ball. First she's with me, then she's with you. She runs from me to look for you, then the other way round. The others she's with during the breaks don't count. Only we two count. This can't go on. There are two of us, but only one can remain." "Yes," Geralt repeated, without removing his hand from his forehead. "Yes, you're right." "In our conceit," the sorcerer continued, "we thought that Yenna would, without hesitation, choose the better man. Neither of us was in any doubt as to who that was. In the end, we started to argue over her favours like whipsters, and like foolish whipsters understood what those favours were and what they meant. I suppose that, like me, you thought it through and know how mistaken the two of us were. Yenna, Geralt, hasn't the slightest intention of choosing between us, were we even to assume she's capable of choosing. Well, we'll have to decide for her, for I wouldn't dream of sharing Yenna with anyone, and the fact that you're here says the same about you. We, Geralt, simply know her too well. While there are two of us, neither of us can be certain. There can only be one. That's the truth, isn't it?
It is,
the Witcher said, moving his numb lips with difficulty.
The truth is a shard of ice.
What?
Nothing.
What's the matter with you? Are you infirm or in your cups? Or perhaps stuffed full of witcher herbs?
There's nothing wrong with me. I've got something in my eye. Istredd, there can only be one. Yes, that's why I came here, undeniably.